Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome to the WP Builds podcast once again. This is episode number 213, entitled What Goes Into Organising and Cancelling a Live WordCamp. It was published on Thursday the 21st of January 2021. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and just a very short bit of housekeeping before we begin. We have a website, it's wpbuilds.com, and we keep all of the content that we create over there. A few links that I might like to mention, wpbuilds.com/subscribe. Having listened to the podcast, if you feel you'd like some more of that, head over to that page, and you can subscribe in all the usual ways. So, for example, we have an email list, well, two in fact. Those emails will either, depending on which list you sign up to, tell you about the content that we produce, so podcasts and news episodes and so on. But also there's another one should you wish to be told about WordPress deals as and when they come up. So that's wpbuilds.com/subscribe. You'll find our YouTube channel, Twitter feed, and our Facebook group, which is a very friendly place of over 2,700 WordPressers. Another one to mention is wpbuilds.com/deals. That's a page which stays up all the time. It's not a Black Friday thing, but it feels a bit like Black Friday. It's there 365 days of the year, and product owners in the WordPress space have reached out to us and given us coupon codes. So if you're thinking of buying something this week, perhaps check that out. wpbuilds.com/deals. And finally, wpbuilds.com/advertise. If you have a WordPress product or service and you would like to put it in front of a specific WordPress audience, which we have, then feel free to go to wpbuilds.com/advertise, a bit like A/B Split Test did. Do you want to set up your A/B split test in record time, like in a couple of minutes? Use your existing pages and test anything with anything else. Buttons, images, headers, rows, anything. And the best part, it works with Elementor, Beaver Builder, and the WordPress block editor. You can check it out and get a free demo at absplittest.com. Okay, we're having a really nice episode today because I love talking about WordCamps. If you've never been to a WordCamp before, it was, until recently, a live event where WordPressers would get together and share their experience and basically have a nice time thinking about WordPress, acting on WordPress and contributing to WordPress. I very much recommend, if you've never been to one, that you think about attending. Well, obviously in the last year, with the pandemic that we've got on our hands, these kind of events have had to be cancelled, and which is a great shame. But I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we got to find out what was involved in setting up a WordCamp? And so today I'm joined by Sjoerd Blom, who is very experienced in setting up a WordCamp. He's been involved in numerous very large WordCamps, and so he talks about that. He talks about what's involved, what has to be done and how far the timeline stretches into the past and so on. What's the role of the volunteers, and what was it like when they had to actually cancel all these WordCamps and take them online? We also get into a discussion about perhaps there's a future in which there's some sort of hybrid online and live events in the future. Anyway, WordCamps are the subject of today's episode. Sadly, the audio was a bit flaky during this episode. I'm not entirely sure why that was, but it was, and so you just have to cope with that. It's certainly listenable, and so I hope that you enjoy it. Hello there. Welcome to the WP Builds podcast once again. Thank you for making it this far. We've got an interview today, and I'm chatting with Sjoerd Blom. Hello.
Hello, Nathan.
Did I get the name right?
You did it perfectly well.
I had to have a few practices before we started recording. The reason...
we know that.
Yeah. There's no way I was going to get that right first time. The reason that I've got Sjoerd on the podcast today is because of WordCamp Europe. Now, we're recording this in August. It will publish a couple of months after that, so there'll be a little bit of a lag. But the news around this will still be fairly painful, I think, because obviously WordCamp Europe was due to take place in Porto this year. It never happened for reasons which nobody needs me to go into. And then we had the news that it was going to be postponed and it was going to take place in the exact same place pretty much a year later. And then that got postponed as well. So it's in the aftermath of that. And Sjoerd is one of the organisers. I'm not sure exactly what your role is, so we'll come to that in a second. But we're here today just to talk about what it involves to put on a WordCamp, the levels of disappointment that might have been felt, what kind of things need to be done to mitigate this kind of thing in the future, and so on. So first of all, Sjoerd, what is your official involvement in WordCamp Europe for 2020-21?
Well, my official involvement, and now let's talk about the regular WordCamp Europe 2020 first, was an organizer for the volunteers team. And when it was transferred into a online event, I became organizer in the communication team and was especially responsible for all the posts on Facebook and the website, of course.
Did you, in the run-up to the organisation, if we sort of rewind the clock, now you may not have been involved right from the very beginning, but roughly speaking, in order to put on an event in the first half of 2020, when did it start to develop as a thing? You know, when did you guys start to meet up and hatch plans and discuss where it was going to be and all that?
Well, a regular WordCamp usually starts somewhere in October. Well, it takes a lot of time just to assemble the team. Usually we have already the previous team posting announcements for call for organizers, call for volunteers, etc., stuff like that. And all these applications come in, and the lead organizers, they select the lead organizers for the particular team, like communication, volunteers, sponsors, etc., etc. And these team organizers, they select their own people for their team. So that's when in October you are able to start your own activities for the event.
Okay, I recall being at WordCamp Europe 2019 in Berlin. And they obviously announced the event at that point, its location, should I say. In fact, I seem to remember that they announced it about 10 seconds before they should have announced it. A slide came up with Porto on it and they hadn't said the word, which was quite entertaining. But so clearly there's work that goes on considerably prior to the October deadline from the lead organisers. I guess they're scoping out possible venues and things. So rather than the October deadline when they're looking for volunteers, there's more going on in the background prior to that as well, I guess.
Yes, and usually when you have a WordCamp, it's a team of local organisers. They prepare an application for a WordCamp. So during the WordCamp in Berlin 2019, there were, I think, 2 applications already in early 2019. Somewhere in February, it's usually closed down, and then the selection proceeds to take place. In this application, you have to present the entire plan for a WordCamp event, like the venue, the date, and the expected number of people, and maybe some budgetary aspects. And that is going to be the start of actually the real WordCamp. But that's all behind the scenes. We don't see that. Only as organizers, we suddenly see a lot of people from a certain team are being hooked up into our own teams. Yeah. And those are usually the local organizers for the event of the next year. So you usually you have the standard team, and then slowly new people are added to the team. And that way they learn the tricks of the team that is doing the thing at that very moment. Yeah.
So the previous team hand over. I think in some cases it's quite common for people to just sort of keep going as well, isn't it? You know, there's several people who just keep into the next one, and hopefully there's enough bodies on the ground to make that happen. Okay, so we're into October 2019 and the application goes out for all these things. The intention of this podcast really is to give people like me who have attended these events, well, I guess to anybody really, whether they've attended or not, some insight into the level of detail, the level of planning that goes into it, so that when we read the press article that WordCamp Europe has been cancelled, and we sort of shrug our shoulders and think, oh dear, that's a bit of a blow. I'll have to get my ticket refunded, so that we have much more appreciation of, well, the real disappointment that must be felt by people like yourself who've given time and no doubt, put things on hold that they could have otherwise been doing. So what, from your perspective, were the things that you had been involved in since October, in the run-up to the decision to finally cancel it? What kind of things go on? What do you need to do? What things need to be in place?
Things that need to be in place are quite a lot of things, like sponsorships. Mm-hmm. You need to get the sponsors ready. They have to pay their sponsor funding. You have to prepare a lot of things for the event, for the venue. Printing is usually already in progress, because you have just finished your design of the logo, the color scheme, stuff like that, all the banners. These are things that are being prepared also. Usually you already had a walkthrough with the team. It's usually somewhere in January, February, when the team says, okay, most of the things we have already inside our head now, and now we need to see if it will fit into the venue. You usually get a platform or you get a plan of the venue, and then you say, okay, we can use that venue for that talk, that room for this, this is the green room for the speakers, etc., etc., etc. And this is all on paper, it looks okay. But then you take all those ideas, those plans to the venue. So usually the whole team is flown into the organizer city, and they do a tour around the venue and check if it's all doable.
Yeah, and I'm guessing. Sorry, carry on.
Yes. It's actually already, the plan is already, the idea is already quite complete in February. It just needs to be confirmed by the real life situation.
Yeah, I mean, all of that sounds very easy when you say it. You've obviously been through this, and it was you've been through the different processes and what have you. But roughly speaking, and you may know the exact number for this, you may not. It may just be plucking a number out of thin air. How many hours do you think of your time you dedicated to this? Up until the point where eventually there was no need for you to dedicate any more time.
It's a climbing curve. In the beginning, it's only 1 or 2 hours a week, but somewhere around January, it's about 8 hours a week. It even goes up. It flattens a little during that time, but as far as the event approaches, and as near as it gets, it can be almost 40 hours a week by May.
Wow! So right at the beginning, a couple of hours a week whilst you're just figuring out what's what, and then it goes to 8 hours a week, which is, to me, you've lost. Well, lost is the wrong word. You have donated, shall we say, 1 day a week minimum. And then as the event approaches, it's possibly up to the entire week. That's a phenomenal amount of time. Do you feel that it's, the burden falls on too few shoulders? In other words, are there enough people volunteering to make WordCamps sustainable, or are we just relying on a few stalwarts who always show up, a few people who are prepared to really give up significant proportions of time? Does the balance fall evenly, do you think, or is it just the good people like yourselves?
Well, both of it. Actually, it's always the same people, but we have a rule. you're not allowed to be a lead organizer for 2 years. After 2 years in a row, you're not allowed to be a lead organizer another time. So you want to keep the ball rolling and have new people come in. But usually people say, okay, I've been a lead organizer for that, and now I'll be volunteering for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then I will be applying again for WordCamp, and don't want to be a lead organizer, but just a regular organizer. So there's a lot of expertise going through the event. What is also intriguing is that usually when an event happens in a certain country, the local people over there also join in.
Yeah.
So either as a volunteer or either as an organizer. So it attracts new people as well. Like in Belgrade, we saw a lot of Serbian people hop in, but also people from the area, from the other countries around, like Romania. So it attracts new people, and the same will be happening in Porto as well.
Yeah,
where we would see a lot of people from Portugal, and well, to be honest, but Porto is quite in the corner of Europe. So if they were planning to attend the event in Berlin, it would cost them a lot of money, and they wouldn't have gone to Berlin. So I think distance does matter as well for people to become a volunteer or an organizer.
I saw the pictures. There's always the customary picture, which is taken, I presume, I have a recollection that it was at the end of WordCamp Europe 2019, and there they all were, all the volunteers in their pink EU 2019 T-shirts. And the picture was pretty big. I'm guessing that there were 100 plus people involved, and whilst many of them, like yourself, would have given up significant amounts of time, perhaps many of those as well would have given up just the time at the event itself. So my question from that is really, do you have an insight roughly how many people have volunteered for WordCamp 2019, even if it was just a small amount of time or a large amount of time? How much charitableness are we asking for here from how many people?
Well, you have to distinguish two groups of people. You have the volunteers, the real volunteers, and the organizers. So organizing team was around 60 or 70 people. I think volunteers was around 150 or 160, maybe even more.
Yeah.
But the volunteers themselves are people who did not organize, but who are instructed to follow a certain role. And they are involved for just 4 hours, they're scheduled for 4 hours to do a particular job. And that might be once or twice a day. And so it might be 4 hours in day one and 4 hours in day two, or even if they are willing to help out a little more, they can even do 4 hours day one, 4 hours, another 4 hours day one, and then drop out in day two. So that's what they do. They are prepared beforehand. They have we have a small instruction tour around the venue. They get to know the rules, the code of conduct, stuff like that, and they are instructed how to deal with people and be the host for the event.
Yeah.
And the organizers, they coordinate actually the volunteers.
It's a finely oiled machine. I confess that WordCamp Europe 2019 was the first European WordCamp that I'd attended. Been to lots of local ones in the UK, equally well-oiled machines, but nothing on that scale. And I'd heard about all of this that goes on in the background, and the sort of like gathering everybody together at the beginning and giving them sort of a workshop, if you like, on how to decide where everything goes and what everybody's roles is and all of that kind of stuff. But it's astonishing that it's as well oiled as it is, because any event that I've ever been to before, there may have been a handful of volunteers, and I'm not talking about WordCamp events here. I'm talking about events that have got nothing to do necessarily with WordPress. Volunteering isn't really the thing. It's normally the event is put on. It's a for-profit thing, and the people will require payment in exchange for their time and so on. So it is a really, really interesting dynamic. Amazing that so many people can be brought to bear at one time for something philanthropic.
You know what? It's also an event to meet friends again, because a lot of volunteers have been volunteering for, I think, 8 or 9 times already, and they don't just volunteer for WordCamp Europe. They also volunteer other WordCamps, local WordCamps like WordCamp London or Paris or wherever they want to go, and wherever they are accepted. And usually it's just volunteers saying, okay, I will be volunteering at that event. Can we meet over there as well? And when you see these volunteers seeing each other again, it's hugging and greeting and how are you and how are you? They all know each other, most of them actually.
Yeah. Oh, that's
so
really
it's a huge family. It's great, and I can imagine why so many people want to volunteer for WordCamp Europe, because it's the opportunity to meet all the people you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's my experience, certainly. Just turning up as an attendee, you get to meet familiar faces. The first time was a bit awkward for me, I think, and then 2 or 3 times later it becomes, oh, hello, and you're just sort of waving at each other across the room, and it's all very wonderful. You mentioned earlier about advertising, and that was one of the first things to get in place, and obviously that brings up the spectre of money, and clearly a huge, I mean, good grief, I mean, WordCamp Europe, 3,000 people, an enormous conference centre, a beautifully appointed hotel, really everything well put together. You know, the advertising space was brilliant. Clearly tons of thought had gone into all of this, and it just brings to mind the question, this cannot be free. I mean, there's advertisers and what have you. I was wondering if there's any involvement from the WordPress Foundation, if there's any reaching into the pockets. Do they help, or is it purely advertising and tickets?
It's purely advertising and tickets.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Yes,
it is.
Yeah. Is that a good dynamic? Do you think? Do you think that's the way it should be? I don't know if you want to get into the politics of this, but I wonder if the WordPress Foundation ought to.
Well, I'm personally speaking, I'm not too fond of commercial organizations having a lot of control, because they found the event. It's also a huge risk, because they can say, okay, if you're not going to do this, I won't bring in a huge pile of money, just 10% of it. That's the risk you have. And yes, it's how it's used to work, and it still works. But maybe someday the commercial organizations might get more, try to get more influence on the organizing team. I don't know.
So very specifically, just thinking about the WordPress Foundation, just that organization, they don't have any financial input into this. No. Okay. Yeah.
The other thing they do is they verify the budget, so they control and they approve the budgets of the event.
Right, so the money, let's say that we're a year out and sponsorship money has begun to roll in from, plugin developers and hosting companies, which is quite typical. That money is then diverted through the WordPress Foundation, is it? They hold on to that money sort of like in escrow, if you like, and then decide when it's going to be released, because obviously that would be a bit of a stretch, wouldn't it, for the volunteers themselves to be in charge of the bank accounts? I guess that wouldn't be a position anybody would want to be in.
Actually, all payments are done through WordCamp Foundation.
Yep.
So they get all the money in, and they pay the bills for the venue and catering and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
that's in simplistic description.
Yeah.
How it works.
It's really it kind of brings me nicely, I suppose, to the the sort of the sad reality of this year. Everybody recognises that what has happened needed to happen. Things must be cancelled. I remember prior to WordCamp Europe being cancelled, can you remember the sort of storm in a teacup which occurred upon WordCamp Asia, which was its inaugural event? It was due to be held in Bangkok. Oh, I'm going to say February this year, possibly earlier. I can't remember. But it was right at the very beginning of the COVID epidemic, and at that time, the spread of the virus was largely in that part of the world, shall we say? Drawing a broad circle around the eastern part of Asia, and one day, very sad news came through. I remember reading it on WordPress Tavern, and it was just to say this event has been cancelled, and there was mixed reactions. There were those people who took the medical angle and thought, well, this is very sensible. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I think it was 800 people they were thinking would show up to that event. It doesn't make a good deal of sense to put 800 people into a melting pot in this case, Bangkok, and then send them back home, and with all of the risks that has. And then there was another body of people who at that point hadn't grasped what would ultimately happen with the virus. Probably with reflection, they'll look back and think, okay, maybe that was the wrong call. But there seemed to be a little bit of disagreement, and who decides this? And so that's my question really. Who does decide to cancel such an event?
Who does decide? Who? Well, that was actually what we had in January, end of January, because then I already heard some rumors on cancelling WordCamp Europe Asia. WordCamp Asia, sorry.
Yeah.
So we were already discussing with a couple of people, what if? And should we prepare for a possible cancellation? So we already investigated a lot of things like, what does it mean? Can we cancel? What does it mean for what does the venue want us to do, etc., etc. So we already did some investigations on possible cancellations. When the event in Asia was cancelled officially, sponsors started to speak to us and say, dear WordCamp WordPress community, please cancel WordCamp Europe as well, etc., etc. You can find the posts on Twitter and Facebook. There was a public demand to cancel the event.
Yeah.
So we had a talk, a town hall meeting actually, with all the organizers in Zoom. And we came to the conclusion maybe we should cancel it. And actually, the decision was made by our team in cooperation with the foundation.
Yeah.
So it was a joint decision, and I think that's the best thing to do. Or actually have community services make the announcement themselves to take off the burden from the organizing team. That's what happened. For instance, WordCamp Asia. The foundation made the announcement. WordCamp Asia is being cancelled. Full stop. So I think we went because we were looking into other options already.
Yeah.
So we made a deliberate decision on should we cancel, should we postpone, and can we make the announcement together? And that's actually what happened.
Yeah, I seem to remember the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that I'm trying to put together in my mind were that the reporting around WordCamp Asia, it felt as if the WordPress Foundation, and specifically Matt, had somehow magicked this decision out of thin air. And at that time, because the risk of the virus was really poorly understood, there were people who just thought this was some arbitrary decision. Turns out with hindsight, it was probably a committee decision, and also probably the best decision that was at all on the table. But at the time, there were many voices who just didn't see that part of the jigsaw. So I'm so pleased that they did cancel it. And I'm so pleased also that you guys very quickly, soon after that cancelled as well. But good for you as well, I think, also in that the medical information that was coming was in no way confusing at that time. You were getting information from all sorts of parts of the world, northern Italy and Spain and what have you, that there's just no way that this should go on. And I think you were lucky to have a couple of, maybe a month or so between your decision and the WordCamp Asia decision for the medical information to get through, and for people to actually be clamouring, no, just cancel it, don't put it on, I'm not coming. And if you put it on, I'm going to tell everybody else not to come, kind of thing. So that was, remarkable, and probably quite brave, because there must have been an awful lot of downsides to cancelling, not just financial, but the uncertainty about what should we do in its place. So that's where I want to move the discussion now. Let's talk about the horrible subject of money first. I know that my ticket price was returned very soon after the event. I got it, and it was all very easy and painless for me. I just literally got the money back one day. How about the sort of sponsorship side of things and the money involved paying for the venue and all of that? Did any of that get lost along the way or consumed because of, I don't know, insurance policies that weren't in place and so on?
Well, to be honest, I'm not in the sponsor team. I haven't been in there, so not really sure if any money got lost. I've seen the discussions on refunding tickets, refunding sponsor budgets as well. So if we want to look into that, I think we should ask somebody else.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's okay. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Well, let's move on to the other stuff then. Obviously, it was a difficult decision to cancel, but the right decision, as we've said. What kind of things needed to happen? I'm thinking about cancelling venues, sending out emails. There must have been suddenly a very large but very different body of work than the work you were expecting, because it's not like as a volunteer you can suddenly go, well, it's not on, that's it, I'm done. There's still things to be done, even though they're not the same things.
True. Cancellation was done through Foundation. They already had the experience with WordCamp Asia. So they were pretty much experienced in refunding it quicker than you could imagine. You know that now. But also cancel the venue. We already checked if we could organize in 2021 at that time. So we already booked a reservation for the venue for next year. Also in June, same time slots actually. And then we were refunding all the other stuff like the contracts, sponsorships, etc., and all was accepted, I think, because of the COVID-19 issue. At that time, Portugal was also seeing an increase of COVID infections, so it was easier to realize that. Yeah.
I think by that point the decision was kind of common sense, wasn't it? That cancellation decision. Whereas for the WordCamp Asia one, it was much more of a toss a coin in the air at that point. But with remarkable foresight, that decision was made, so that was great. The physical event was cancelled. The tickets got refunded. The venue was put on hold for another year. But the decision at some point, and I don't know the time frame on this, because it felt like there was maybe a few weeks between cancellation and then the announcement of the online event. But it felt to me like the online event was announced almost as if it was fully fledged and ready to go. That is to say that there was not like, well, we're going to put an online event, hold on and we'll give you some information. It kind of felt like, well, we're going to put on an online event and here's how it's going to happen. So there must have been quite a lot of work going on. Again, was it people like you stepping into the breach and organising it? And if so, what was that like?
I'm glad you said it. It looked like it was already done. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. No, the announcement of cancellation was on March 12th.
Yep.
And I think about 2 weeks afterwards, we had formed a new team. It was a trimmed down team. So the organising team for the regular event was asked, are you willing to participate in organising an online event? So that was the question we had just on the day of the cancellation. I think about 50% of the team said, okay, we're going to do that and we want to join and see what will happen. We had no idea on how to do things.
Yeah.
Really. So, so when it was only 10 weeks before the real event took place.
Yeah.
See, we had a huge task in designing a complete, entire new event. How are we going to organize an online event? What does it look like? Will we have a contributor day? What should that look like? How about the speakers? Can we use them? They were already selected for their talks. Can we use them again? Are they willing to cooperate? How are we going to broadcast? Are we going to stream on YouTube, Facebook? All kinds of questions. What should it look like? So at that time, there were also a couple of other events online. And we looked at those events, how they organized it. And we got some ideas on how to do things and how to do things, not to do things, actually. So it was kind of chaotic organization. And we had to test a few things like platforms. There are virtual platforms that look like an event, an online event, around tables. And when you have a stage with a screen on it,
right,
where you can see a speaker, stuff like that. We tested those. We had demos, but meanwhile, time continued.
Yes.
So I think we were willing to make it look like a virtual event. But there were some hiccups in the platform, and there were also things like accessibility, which was not fully implemented, which is a huge issue if you're in a WordCamp or WordPress community.
Yeah.
So we finally decided to just stream it through YouTube, have the closed captioning. Which was already booked, and they said we can hook in onto your stream. It's no problem. So they did that, and then we were looking at options like what can we do with sponsors, because sponsors, they were willing to sponsor if the platform was or the event was useful to them as well. They should be able to present themselves, stuff like that. So we found this combination you've seen right now for WordCamp Europe, where we use Slack for Contributor Day together with Zoom sessions. And we had speakers pre-record their own talks.
Yeah.
So we could prepare the videos with logos and hook them into the slides, which they send in as well. So it looked more like a real professional event. We had even a tune and a logo moving in between scenes. So it evolved very, very quickly. It was a huge event happening, actually. we were so much surprised to see, oh, we can do this, you can do that. We can have Zoom sessions, we can have Q&As after the talks, and then through Zoom. And sponsor booths in Zoom as well. And to our surprise, which there was one thing we did not expect, that was the after party. That people organize their own after party during Zoom sessions. So 4 hours after the last talk had finished, there were still 30 or 40 people in the Zoom sessions and having a drink and have their own after party.
Yeah.
So somehow the people accepted the whole concept, and they made their own idea and their own version of a WordCamp.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel that we're in a time at the minute where we're just trying to figure all this out, aren't we? These online events, to which, not just the WordPress community, but every community writ large across the world, all of them have got events where people fly in and participate and all of that, and they're suddenly thrown into this mess of trying to figure out what that should look like now that the real person-to-person event has been taken from us. And I feel that we're in a transition time. And so, like you said, you examined these platforms where they try to mimic the real world and have pretend tables and a pretend stage and all of that. And whilst it looks really nice, it also feels like it's not mimicking it is maybe not the right decision. And I confess I've looked at these platforms again for various other reasons and drawn the same conclusion. I much prefer to just turn up to a page with some comments by the side and just tune in. I'm not really that keen to sort of pretend to sit at a table with people and so on and so forth. But I could be in the minority. But we're faced now with the cancellation of 2021. I'm assuming, I can't, my memory is failing me here. I'm assuming that there'll be an online replacement for that, like there was this year.
Yeah.
That was
we're working on that one. Okay. There's nothing official yet. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it just, I think by the time that we get to that this time next year, I have a vague feeling that the way these events look and the expectations from people will have shifted. Somebody at some point in the next year, I feel, is going to just crank out an event which is really different, and everybody will go, that's what it should be like. That's the way we need to make it. But we're not there yet. And then sadly, the news, which happened very recently, again, we are recording this when this news just came out, the opposite for WordCamp US. They've made the decision to cancel it wholesale for this year, 2020. The event, which was due to take place later towards the end of this year, has been cancelled in every which way possible. So there's no in-person events, there's no replacement. And they cited that they thought there was, I'm going to choose my words carefully here, I think the word was fatigue. They thought that there was fatigue of online meetups. And I wonder what you thought about that. Did you feel that the WordCamp Europe online, was it a success? Did you sense that it was a bit of a, did it please you? Did it disappoint you? Were you happy with the outcome? Were there lots of lessons to be learned?
Well, most of the questions, I fully agree. I love them. I love the event. It was great. The outcome, it was surprising me. Like the after party Zoom session that just popped up. Also, the number of attendees, 8,000 registered attendees.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
It's extraordinary. But also the fatigue. I can imagine that. People have been doing all kinds of Zoom sessions because they just are not leaving their own premises. They stay at home, have professional Zoom sessions because of people working at home. People are done with it. They just don't want to they don't want to be watching the screen all day long for 2-3 days. I don't think it's enough for that moment. So I can imagine that WordCamp US sees a sudden fatigue. I agree. If that's the reason for cancelling an online event as well.
So it's both a drawback and a benefit. My experience was with WordCamp Europe in person in 2019 was that it was very busy for me. As it turns out, I was actually doing what I'm doing now to you. I was interviewing people at that event, and so it was busy, and not a moment of my time was diverted. I was able to concentrate. I had obviously had to get on a plane, stay in a hotel, and I was fully focused on what I was doing. Whereas I had that same intention for WordCamp 2020 online, but I found that the normal everyday world of my family and my house and the normal constraints of family life were sufficient that I didn't attend anywhere near the amount that I was anticipating. My son bumps his head, and that's me. That next session is not happening for me, and I need to go and cook a meal. So that's I think the backdrop upon which these online events have got to. It's just reality, isn't it? You've got to cope with the fact that people are not going to drop in at 9 a.m. and leave at 7 p.m. They're going to drop in and drop out, and the measure of success isn't really how to describe it. It's not that people are participating all the time, that it's just people drop in, drop out, enjoy it, find the ones that they want to go to, and that's it. We just expect a different range of outcomes and a different set of attendances.
True, and also because all the sessions are being recorded, you could just watch it on demand. So it's more like people watching Netflix and do video on demand sessions. So they just watch a video or a session whenever they want to, when they have time. Maybe a WordCamp online event will evolve into this as well. A video on a WordCamp on demand.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, that's a nice idea.
We have WordPress.tv with all the sessions available. YouTube has an archive as well, so we can watch all those interesting talks from our bedroom. Just when we have a poor night's sleep, we can see and listen to Matt.
Yeah, at stupid o'clock in the morning when you're not sleeping, you can switch it on and watch. Yeah, that's true. Wondering a slightly bizarre question, perhaps. Obviously, the sponsorship is a key component, and at the events, there's a great deal of time and energy putting into making the sponsors stand out. They're put in significantly prominent positions so that you must, let's say, for example, walk past them, and they go to considerable lengths to make their booths engaging, and they put a lot of effort into it. Was that an area where we've still got learning to do? I have no insight into this. I've just got a feeling that from a sponsor's point of view, it must be more difficult to make your offering stand out or even be discovered on an online event. That must be a challenge.
That has been a challenge. Yes, it is. I'm not sure about the figures, but if I had them available, I would not share them because those are more competitive figures. But I know they have been struggling with how can we attract the attendees. I think that's also the advantage of organizing an online event. How can you make sponsors stand out? And that's when these virtual event areas stand out. They have these tables where people sit around, and they have just around on the sides of the venue. They have those sponsor booths you can click on, etc., etc.
Yeah. It's like I was saying, this is the game we're in at the moment. Currently, we don't seem to have any insight into when the world will return to air quotes normal. So this is the job now, isn't it? It's to figure out what these platforms would look like. Should we wish to do WordCamps online, which I, for one, wish to happen. What do they look like? How do we get the sponsorship so that it's so that it's justified? It justifies the cost of the event to them, but also isn't so invasive that it feels like you're watching, I don't know, television or something like that. It's an interesting dilemma that we're going to have to bridge in the next year or so. So, as always is the case, we're sadly running out of time. Is there anything that you feel you wished to cover that we never got a chance, or I didn't ask the right question? Anything you wanted to say that I didn't get you to say?
Oh, actually, no.
Oh, good.
I think we've covered most of it.
Yeah,
I think it's okay. So I hope you have the insight you wanted to have.
Yeah.
And I hope the listeners are more clear on how a WordCamp is organized. And
yeah. Well, that was very much it.
How did you cancel something like that?
Yeah. How does it get put together? Who's involved? How many hours are involved? And what the impact of COVID is for this year's events plus events going forward. I think we did a pretty good job. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And good luck if you're involved with the next one. I hope it goes well.
I hope so too. Thank you very much.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that. A very interesting chat about a subject which I really am deeply passionate about. I do enjoy WordCamps. I've enjoyed attending them, and I'd had some inclination into what was involved in putting on a WordCamp, but by no means the depth that Sjoerd was able to share with us today. I had no idea there was so much involved, so much lead time, so many different pieces making up the WordCamp jigsaw, and I'm really appreciative to all of those people who donate their valuable time. Very, very, very grateful indeed. Perhaps you've got some thoughts on whether or not we should continue some kind of hybrid events in the future, hopefully when the pandemic is behind us. Should we have events which are live but also available to be attended online, or should we just go straight back to being live events? Let us know in the Facebook group, wpbuilds.com/Facebook, or you can go to the comments at the bottom of the show notes on the podcast at wpbuilds.com. This is episode number 213. The WP Builds podcast was brought to you today by AB Split Test. Do you want to set up your split test in record time? The new AB Split Test plugin for WordPress will have you up and running in just a couple of minutes. Use your existing pages and you can test anything against anything else. Buttons, images, headers, rows, anything. And the best part, it works with Elementor, Beaver Builder and the WordPress block editor. Check it out and get a free demo at absplittest.com. Okay, we have a new podcast for you coming out next Thursday. They always come out Thursday, 1 p.m. UK time, but that one, next week's one, will be myself and David Wormsley because we alternate them. An interview one week, which is the one you've just listened to, and a discussion or a debate or something like that with David Wormsley the following week. We're doing an episode series going through the letters of the alphabet, A through Z or A through Z, depending on where you live, discussing all of the different pieces that make up the WordPress ecosystem, one letter at a time. We'll also be live 2 p.m. UK time. That's in the WP Builds Facebook group, or you can go to wpbuilds.com/live. That's for our weekly WordPress news, which we're now calling This Week in WordPress. I'd love for you to join us and make some comments about the news from the previous week. Either way, there's lots going on. We'll see you in the Facebook group or around the internet, perhaps here this time next week. All I need to do is fade in some cheesy music and say bye-bye for now.